Hello everyone, welcome to another video of STEMAC. Today we are going to talk about carbohydrates. So we know carbohydrates helps to produce energy in our body, and today we are going to briefly talk about the structure of carbohydrate. So in carbohydrate there are carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. The ratio of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen in carbohydrates is 1:2:1. That means if a carbohydrate has 1 carbon, the hydrogen number will be 2 and oxygen number will be 1. So if we talk about an example, we can talk about glucose, which is C6H12 and O6. If we do the ratio of the carbon number, hydrogen number and oxygen number, we get 6:12:6, which is equals to 1:2:1. Now another point we have to keep in mind that not always a molecule having the ratio of 1:2:1 of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen will not always be a carbohydrate. For example, we can talk about formaldehyde. We know about formaldehyde. So here we can see here is 1 carbon, 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. So the ratio here is also 1:2:1, but this is not a carbohydrate. Then here we come for sucrose. So this is also a carbohydrate, which is sucrose, but here we can see the ratio here is 12:22:11. Here we can see the ratio is not 1:2:1 where we see in the general structure, but it is also a sugar. So this point we should keep in mind that the ratio might not always be 1:2:1. Now we are going to talk about the types of carbohydrate based on their chemical structure. They can be of 4 types. Number 1, which is monosaccharides. Number 2, which is disaccharides. Number 3, which is oligosaccharides, and number 4, which is polysaccharides. So what is monosaccharides? Monosaccharides will have 3 to 10 carbon numbers in them. Here we are talking about carbon, right? Here we see the second type, which is disaccharide. So what is disaccharide? Disaccharide will have 2 monosaccharides. Here we are not talking about carbon but monosaccharides. Right? Then what is oligosaccharides? Oligosaccharides will have 3 to 10 monosaccharides in them. So we just write here 3 to 10 monosaccharides. So what is the 4th type, polysaccharide? So to know if a sugar is polysaccharide, we have to see if after hydrolyzing that sugar, if we get monosaccharides more than 10, we can call it a polysaccharide. Example can be starch, pectin, cellulose, etc. So we can write here more than 10, right? More than 10 monosaccharides. So these are the types of carbohydrates. Now we will know more about the structure. So based on the carbonyl group carbohydrate has, it can be called polyhydroxyaldehyde or polyhydroxyketone. So we are going to talk about monosaccharides now. So we know monosaccharides has carbon number 3 to 10 it can has. So we are going to talk about triose. Tri means 3, so it should have 3 carbons, right? So to write the structure, we first have to give 3 carbons in a chain structure. Let's say it's an aldose and this is a ketose. For the aldose, we have to give aldehyde group at the first carbon. And the structure for both, a common thing is the last carbon will be CH2OH, both for aldose and ketose. And for the aldose, the middle carbon will have a hydroxide at the right arm and hydrogen at the left arm. This aldose is called glyceraldehyde. And for ketose, the ketone group will be at the second carbon. It's a bit different from this one, as the carbonyl group was at the first carbon. So here the second carbon will have the ketone group, and the first carbon will be the same as the last carbon. So I guess ketose is a bit easy for to draw, right? So this is called dihydroxyacetone. Next, we are going to talk about a pentose, another example of a monosaccharide. So we know pent means 5, right? Penta. So it will have 5 carbon, as we have seen before. So we give 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 carbons in the structure. And just like before, we said that the end carbon will have CH2OH. And as it's an aldose, the carbonyl group will be CHO. And the middle carbons will have hydroxide and hydrogen, as we've seen before, the simple structure. So this is called a ribose. So what happens when it's a deoxyribose? The second carbon loses a oxygen. When it happens, we call it deoxyribose. So what happens here is the oxygen is gone. So if this structure forms a ring structure, deoxyribose, we can find that on DNA structures. Then we are going to talk about hexamers. Is glucose. For glucose, there will be 6 carbons. We see here we give 6 carbons. Similar structure that we have. So it will be an hexamer, hexose. So it's a glucose. We all know about glucose, right? So it's also an aldose. So the first carbon will have an aldehyde group. For this is the second carbon, this is the third carbon, this is the fourth carbon, this is the fifth carbon. As I said, as we already saw in the simple structures, the middle carbons had hydroxide at the right side and hydrogen at the left side. Here is a bit difference in the third carbon, that in the right side there will be hydrogen and in the left term there will be hydroxide. And for carbon number 2, 4 and 5, it's the same. So there will be hydroxide at the right side and hydrogen at the left side. So this is that well-known glucose that we always talk about. Next, we will know about disaccharides, polysaccharides, and oligosaccharides. Lastly, we are going to talk about disaccharides, oligosaccharides, and polysaccharides. So disaccharides, we can know from the name, it will have 2 monosaccharides. One example of disaccharide is maltose or maltose, whatever you say. Maltose has 2 glucose in it. So what is the normal ring structure of glucose? We already saw the chain structure. So here we can see the normal structure of glucose. What happens when maltose is formed? When maltose is formed, H2O or water is gone from 2-glucose in the reaction. So in here we can see the first carbon of one glucose and the fourth carbon of another glucose react with each other, which releases water and a bond is formed. So this hydroxide with another hydroxide reacts and 2H and 1 O is released. So the maltose is formed. So there are other examples of disaccharides. You will know when you read the book. And then we are going to talk about oligosaccharides. Oligosaccharides has monosaccharides and the number is 3 to 10 monosaccharides. One example that we can give here is raffinose. So raffinose is a trisaccharide. So here we can see raffinose has glucose, galactose and fructose in it. So we can call it a oligosaccharide. Polysaccharide is a bit complex. We are just going to see a reaction to understand it here. We can see if we hydrolyze or react starch with water, we get n number of glucose, which is more than 10. So we can call it polysaccharides. So there are other examples that we talked about. So it's a bit complex. We will know about it in another video. This was it for me today. Thank you so much.